So we'll start with the refuge and bodhicitta prayers.
You.
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Welcome back, Dr. Sparham. We're so happy to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you all. So nice to see you all. So should I just take over right now? Oh, I think everybody else is muted, so I think it's me. Good, I'm the co-host. Now I'll just see if I can get rid of that view. There. So I hope everyone can hear me. Good. And let me just open my little presentation here. So again, let me share the screen. So I'm the co-host, am I? Just so we do this. For some reason, I can't find, well, I don't want to have that, I guess. There we go. There we go. Good. Where would there we go. Good. So again, the title we have for this series of talks is How Compassion Balances the Nihilism in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And last week, I suggested that the author of these Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, one understands as here with these two people worshipping a Buddha in the way that one wishes to visualize a Buddha, not limited in any particular way. And again, there. And here, again, as last week, is indeed a beautiful example of a Tibetan translation of the Sheraki Parudu Chimba Tongdrak Kyapa, the 100,000 Perfection of Wisdom. So this is one of 12 volumes. Indeed, this, just incidentally, is it's shared all around the United States, and some of the volumes are missing. It's unclear exactly what the provenance of this is, but it was one of those books which was either bought or anyway found, let's say, in Tibet. And the last volume is still not available, so we don't quite know where it was done, but it's done incredibly beautifully. So today I suggest, as last time, we first think about sacred books. And why? So when we reflect on Nairatmya, which is to say the emptiness of ourselves, we understand, and I think I can say that we're all not totally new to Buddhism, so I'll speak from that perspective. So we understand when we think about the emptiness of self, of ourself, that we're not harming ourselves, that we're helping ourselves. We're purifying ourselves, as it were, of projections that lead us towards violence and harm. In other words, projections which hurt us. So similarly, when we reflect on those books that are of the greatest importance to us, books that we worship because they teach profound truths and practices, we should know that when we consider them carefully and realize that they're ultimately empty of any inherent existence, that the profound statements they contain are ultimately meaningless, that we are not harming our faith or the faith of others. Quite the opposite. We are deepening our faith because we are, in the same way, removing false projections that lead to violence and harm. So this book that we're talking about over these few sessions is a book of the greatest importance to Mahāyāna Buddhists. And that's an odd thing, isn't it? That one takes as an object of the analysis that leads us to understand the emptiness of something. That very doctrine, or doctrine then as it is enshrined, written on paper, both as we have it in our mind as an understanding and the actual material reality of it, that we take that as the object to find that it has no inherent existence. And that even what it's saying, when you really look for the meaning, for the content of the sentence, you'll end up with that same emptiness. And in that sense, I used in the title a nihilism, because it certainly leaves you, as it says in these books, with nowhere to stand. Because, of course, the book itself is a sacred book, which I mean to say these statements which I'm making, which are sort of coming from the Prajnaparamita, these sacred words are subject to the same investigation. It's a very odd thought. They're no better, no worse, in an ultimate sense, than any other statements. So that's the nihilism part. I just wanted to touch base with it because, as I say, we know that when we, having been around this sort of Buddhism for quite some time, we know that we're doing it because we think it's good for us. We think it'll help us. It's a method which, we think this is of value to us, not just in a small way, but in a real deep way. So when you talk about the emptiness of all phenomena or dharmas, not just the emptiness of oneself, the person, it extends to these books. And I think my own reading of this particular literature is that it's particularly focused on books. And it's sort of a little bit complicated, but I hope today that we can see how that works. So last week, we looked at this, what I call the great statement. Here, Sharadvatiputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all phenomena in all their aspects should persevere in the perfection of wisdom. And so this opening sentence that I spoke about last week, and is the, as you might say, point of departure again, for what we're going to talk about today. It's an opening sentence from the long versions of the Prajnaparamita. And I chose it based on an explanation of the Prajnaparamita, which is now extant only in Tibetan translation. So this explanation, it's another book, not the actual sutra, if you will. The truth is, the word sutra is a really odd word to use, even in a Buddhist sense. Clearly in Sanskrit, a sutra, su is cognate, it has the same root as the English word sew, to sew clothes. And a tra means the means to sew. So it means the thread. So it means just the thread of something. And this is not just a thread, right? It's 12 volumes long. So it's just colossal. So usually you only find Prajnaparamita. You don't find Prajnaparamita Sutra. Though in the Tibetan translations, they do put sutra because it's customary to do so with each of the how do you say, each of these sorts of texts which are included in the canon. But anyway, so this explanation of the Prajnaparamita definitely was translated before 820, which is kind of the beginning of the translation, a huge amount of translation of sacred Buddhist works into Tibetan. And so I just wanted to show you, I'm going to the 84,000 site. I myself have the good fortune to translate this work over about 10, 11 years. And so this is, as you see, it says, it's the long explanation of the noble perfection of wisdom in 100,000, 25,000, and 18,000 lines. It's a fascinating text in the history of the perfection of wisdom in Tibet, a complex history we can't get into here. Now, so the reason I just wanted to go here is it explains why I took that one sentence out of the 12 volumes of the perfection of wisdom in 100,000 lines, the longest version we have, why I took that one statement that I presented to you last week, why I took it as a beginning. And so here is why. So this is the explanation. So the writer of the explanation is citing the word from the scripture. It could be the 18,000, the 25,000, or the 100,000. And it's a slightly different translation. This is more mine. Here, Shariputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all dharmas in all forms should make an effort at the perfection of wisdom. It's the same. And then it says, and here's the part, thus the Lord, and we can leave out that bit, thus the Lord says to Elder Shariputra, here, Shariputra, Bodhisattva great beings who want to fully awaken to all dharmas in all forms should make an effort at the perfection of wisdom. And having given just that explanation, he then falls completely silent. This is, therefore, the perfection of wisdom taught in brief. So it will then, there's some who understand very quickly and some who understand it not even after 12 volumes. The truth is, when you read it in 12 volumes, it starts to make sense. Otherwise, it's incredibly hard to make sense of what this is saying. So that's not just a corroboration or a justification for why I chose that line, but also it gives me an opportunity to sort of introduce some of the books which one has the opportunity now to read, to slowly but surely get a feeling for these sacred books. Sacred books indeed, which at the end one focuses on to find that they too, like the self we project ourselves to be, which certainly for me at the age of 75, going on 76, you come back in 20 years, he's not there, you know what I mean? And so they are, at the very least, impermanent, and far more than that, as it says again and again, never ever were produced, never came into being, and in that sense, totally empty. So, let's see if I can move on here. It says we should persevere at the perfection of wisdom. Prajna paramita. We should persevere at it. And so, what is it? What is she? It's a feminine abstract noun in Sanskrit, and so it is feminine, and usually it is she. And that's an important point here, because it is not easy to get one's head around just exactly what these books are conveying by this word. Now, probably we all know that the perfection of wisdom is the sixth of the six perfections. And in that sense, it's relatively straightforward. The perfection of wisdom is not apparently the perfection of giving or the perfection of patience. It's its own, it's there by itself. It's a perfection of, let's say, at least the intellect, and even beyond that, it's the perfection of an understanding, certainly the understanding of the ultimate, of emptiness, and probably the conventional reality too. But here, Prajnaparamita is clearly not just that, because it's the name of the entire book, which teaches not just the perfection of wisdom, the sixth of the six perfections. So it has a more complex meaning. And so it's certainly, I would say here, I just put a few ideas. It's the origin of the Buddhist teachings. It's an incredibly important aspect of it. It's the origin. We'll see that the main thing here. The verse, this is the most famous explanation in the Tibetan context of Prajnaparamita. Homage to that mother of a Buddha with an assembly of Shravakas and Bodhisattvas, the all knowledge that leads Shravakas seeking peace to calm, the path knowledge with which those working the welfare of worlds have done what helps the living, and perfectly endowed, better here is united, and perfectly united with whom, or perfectly endowed with which, the sages give expression to this all aspected variety. All aspected variety means all the different teachings of the Buddha. Ya sarvanyataya nayutyupashamam shantaisha shravakam. Ya marganyataya jagatita kritam lokartha sampadika. Sava karamidam vadanti munayo vishwam yaya samgataha. Tasyai Shravaka Bodhisattva Ganinu Buddhasya Matrite Nama. So, origin. Clearly, it's, perfection of wisdom, I gotcha. Yeah, but when you say, well, if the intellectual understanding of emptiness and the conventional is the origin of the Buddhist teachings, you might say yes, but it doesn't immediately come to mind, right? If you think back to last week, if you had the wanting to become enlightened, and then you have that desire, that wanting, that's much more getting towards the Buddhist notions of citta, of mind as the thing that precedes all. you know, that famous, from the oldest fundamental Buddhist statements, that thought or citta or mind precedes whatever you do, which is true. I always like to think of our careers. If you never had the thought to do it, if you never had the idea to do it, even if they, you know, bashed you to do it, one would not be able to do it. So the origin of the Buddhist teachings, and here, by extension then, Prajnaparamita becomes the origin of all that is good. That's a bit complex when you think about it. And by extension, again, the origin of everything good and bad in a world purified of delusion. In other words, everything that we think of as bad, the terrible things, is the origin of those too in a world purified of delusion. They're all there for the benefit of those who benefit from them. So the Madhyamaka Avatara, which is very well known, I think, in the traditions which we follow, is understood. The Madhyamaka Avatara, of course, is an explanation of Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna, the foundational sort of teacher for emptiness. And so the Avatara is explaining that book of Nagarjuna. And at the beginning, it says the foundational teachings come from Buddhists, which is to say the Shravakas, the hearers, you know, as in that verse I just read. Fundamental Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths, about the kleshas, about the origin of suffering, not to be found outside, but in the motivations and the actions. Those whose religious faith, let's say, is founded on those basic teachings, they come from Buddhas who teach it. And Buddhas come from bodhisattvas. And bodhisattvas come from the special compassion that accompanies bodhicitta. How does it go? Nyendra Sangiti Nam Tubonke. Right? The Shravakas and the middling Buddhas, Sangye Tubonke, come from the Lord Buddhas, and so on. Therefore, I make homage to you, compassion. I'm sure you'll have heard that opening lines of homage from Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara. So that's talking about the perfection of wisdom. So what am I saying here at first then? We know that the perfection of wisdom is an understanding, as in the six perfections. Here, it's a little more fleshed out, let's say. And she is the origin, the mother, as we see. And this is the book that I want to really focus on today. It is the homage from the beginning of the Abhisamaya Alankara. That's something like Abhisamaya. Abhisamaya, you know, Samaya, you have to keep your Samaya, right? That's your connection with your guru, so to speak, you know. Abhi. Not sure how to render that. But here, I think it's pretty clear what it means is, if you think of how you study in order to learn something, you have mental states which have knowledge, and then somehow they all merge, even though they can be separated out, they all come together in one Abhisamaya, coming together. So anyway, that's the title. It is the most important text by far in the study of the Prajnaparamita in Tibet. And indeed, it's what I began studying, I don't know, what is it, 40, 45 years ago? I don't remember how long ago, maybe 50 years? I can't remember. So this is the difficulty here. Who is being spoken to? Who is being spoken to? And we're not used to it, because I think the people who are being spoken to here are very, very faithful Buddhists who are being told that their Buddhism, I say, it's not that it's not as good as they think. It's not that we're not as good as we think we are. We are as good as we think we are, but not for the reasons we think it. Let's put it that way. It's not because we're God's gift to mankind, so to speak. No, it's because of just every living being is precious. Why? Because of their final nature and their emptiness, which is they share with Buddhas and everything else in the universe. But here specifically, it's being directed towards those, and I'm sure we all have experienced a sort of real admiration for the basic teachings enshrined in the oldest, historically oldest Buddhist scriptures. Homage to that mother of a Buddha. And then who is she? She is, here it is, it's like sarvajñata. So sarva means all, and ñā is the same as the English to know. The all-knower. So you might say omniscience. The problem with saying omniscience is it's the omniscience which gives you all of Buddhist teaching before you begin analyzing Buddhist teachings with this very negative way, if you will, of thinking about things. That, what do you mean, even my Buddhist teachings? This, which I am finding is leading me towards peace? That there's no peace? That I never started going anywhere? I'm not going anywhere? Well, what am I doing this for then? So all knowledge is that knowledge of that person who is truly, I mean, you cannot throw away the fundamental Buddhist teachings and think you're going on to the Prajnaparamita. It doesn't work that way. You have to have the Buddhist teaching. You have to have total admiration, faith, if you will. And if I get rid of those pride and arrogance and getting too angry and blabbering on, and whatever it is, all of the ordinary things, you know, not just looking after my behavior, not stealing things and lying, you know, just the tremendous admiration one has for what seems so simple and is simple. But when you look at all the other complicated things, you think, yeah, that really is classy. It's just saying, better do that. You know, if you want to look after yourself, hang in there, because even hanging in there is going to be difficult, at least for me. And you have such admiration for that. Never mind, you know, what you call marikpa, avidya, you know, the fundamental ignorance, you know, the active projection onto these 5 heaps of things, of something permanent, of something which is just one thing, rather than something which is going to degenerate, and something which will as much as anything else we've seen over our lives. Just the oddest thing, not be there anymore, like people we've known so well who they're almost sort of there, except if you go where they used to be, they're not there anymore. So where'd they go? The oddest thing. So it's just such an incredibly fine part of our human heritage, that sort of presentation. And so the admiration for that, it's talking to people with a tremendous, not just admiration intellectually, but who have really worked on it and seen the value for themselves. So homage to the mother of a Buddha. This is, you're talking about who she is. She's that knower or all that omniscience that leads those seeking peace to their calm. So he said, well, I thought it was Mahāyāna. It is. But you say, well, how come you're saying the Prajnaparamita is the knowledge that the old Buddhists prior to the Mahāyāna had, which leads them to calm, to nirvana? And then it says it's also, she is also the knowledge of paths or path knowledge with which those working the welfare of worlds have done what helps the living. So that looks like, oh, that's the knowledge of bodhisattvas, right? So you might, well, you see, that's the Prajnaparamita there, because bodhisattvas, right? Mahāyāna? No, that's a fundamental mistake. It's saying homage to the mother, who is, who is, who is. It doesn't say she is that and not the first one. And that, of course, is the relativization of the value of the books that I keep talking about, built in there, and adverting in that sense to a principle of compassion, which can give you the notion of an origin. So that's why this is really worth thinking about, but a little difficult. And then perfectly endowed with which, perfectly united with whom, the sages give expression to this all-aspected variety. Well, that's a literal translation. The all-aspected variety. Just go and look in the Tibetan canon. I think it's 108 volumes, is it? Each of which is 800 pages long. And you've got to wonder if it'll keep coming, because when you read the traditional histories, it's like up there in the worlds of the gods, there's a heck of a lot more that we don't have access to yet, so to speak. So the all-aspected variety is the doctrines and the teachings of an all-enlightened Buddha, teaching the so-called three turnings of the wheel of the Dharma, the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the teachings of the perfection of wisdom, the teachings of the Samdhi Nirmochana. So I don't know if one can mentally make the leap, but me going on about books, I want to talk about books. I want to talk about the sacredness of books. She is that which Buddhas have, that knowledge, or she with whom, she endowed with which, united with whom, having that knowledge that the sages, the Buddhas, the enlightened beings give expression, teach this all-aspected variety of teachings. So, of course, where does that leave Buddhism? Where does that leave the Prajnaparamita? You mean, I thought this was the best of all the teachings. Yeah, but it might just be for certain people. I mean, all aspect variety, no, but this one is the one. But if they're only for the benefit of those who hear them. There's no place to go. There's no place we started. There's no place we are. So I think here perhaps one can begin to intuit the way that the compassion moderates or balances the nihilism of the teachings in the Prajnaparamita, because she is not just that ultimate, that wisdom which is an understanding of the ultimate, the total non-production. It is really absurd when you think about it. It's like, reminds me of that guy when I first started across the table in a restaurant in Kathmandu who leaned across and said, "I'm not here." I said, "Oh, right, out of this place then. This is a weirdo if you ever saw one." You know, it's like, there he is sitting there and he's telling me he's not there. It's like, that's about as weird as you can come, right? So it's not that you're just not there, right? It's not that. That's not Prajnaparamita that now I've understood. But without that, there is nothing. One can't get rid of the kleshas without the all-knowledge that leads Shravakas seeking peace to come. Without the basic Buddhism, there is no Buddhism. There is no Prajnaparamita. There is no Prajnaparamita in that sense, other than the fundamental Buddhism. You have the fundamental Buddhist teachings, and now you also have what's called the pratipaksha. Is it the antidote, the counteracting force? As we come into these things, we bring in all of the kleshas, and we don't need to look far to see how you can march under the banner of Mahāyāna Buddhism as much as you can march under any banner. You can do as much horror marching under the banner of Mahāyāna Buddhism as you can under the banner of anything else you want to bring up. So balancing that with an incredible admiration. Most of the Prajnaparamita is talking about how good the Prajnaparamita is. Because one has to balance it. One has to, this is the conventional, if you will. So how is it put across in the perfection of wisdom itself? It's put across in terms of the teachings of the Buddha, the doctrines of the Buddha. Doctrines here, when it says knowledge or knower, this nyata, it's unclear in the original whether it means the person who knows or the actual knowledge of the person. Doesn't make a lot of difference. It's that knowledge, and that knowledge as how it translates out in words as doctrines. Buddhist doctrines, doctrine of emptiness, doctrine of selflessness, doctrine of the Four Noble Truths, doctrine of the Five Skandhas, doctrine of the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, the 12 links of dependent origination, the 6 elements that make up the world. That's the way she is taught in terms of the teachings that originate with her. So that is the conventional truth, because of course the doctrines teach the truth. You know, in other words, you have the truth of the 18 emptinesses, the emptiness of external things, the emptiness of internal things, the emptiness of emptiness. All of these are said to be what's there. They are taught in these Buddhist scriptures. And in the Prajnaparamita, they are all listed interminably, again and again and again, right up to the 18 unique qualities of a perfect Buddha, as well as the 32 major and 80 minor signs, listed again and again and again. And always with it, no form, no feeling, no perception, no volitional factors, no consciousness, no ignorance up to no old age and death, no cessation of old age and death, no cessation of ignorance, no attainments, no bodhisattvas, no enlightenment. It's continually going through them again and again. So when we talk about the conventional truth and how you have to put it together with the ultimate truth in the books, in these actual books, the Prajnaparamita, it's put across as the teachings which originate. But clearly it's talking not just about the books, what would you call the material culture, the artifacts in material culture, those books. It's not even just talking about our ideas in our minds that we have. It's talking about the reality to the extent that it's there. And it is saying homage to the origin of the Buddha with the Shravakas and who she is, the one who gives rise to all of that teaching. So, as I said back here, it's we go. She's clearly the origin of the Buddhist teachings. And since she's the origin of all the Buddhist teachings, at the very least, if we're going to respect our parents, if we're going to try to be just ordinary, decent people, not killing and stealing and so forth, where does that come from in human culture? Where does it arise? And so, so at this point, you get back to a notion of, the Buddhists come from here. As you put it, the foundational teachings come from Buddhists. Buddhas come from bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas come from special compassion that accompanies bodhicitta. And you could see why, scripturally speaking, Tibetan Buddhism, which is imbued totally with Mahāyāna Buddhism, is continually stressing Nyingje Chenpo, the great compassion, bodhicitta. But what it is and how it functions relative to these ancient books is, let's say, is worth thinking about, is worth contemplating. So, yeah, I don't want to overload things. Has anyone at this point got any questions or contributions they'd like to make? I have, another explanation of the meaning of Prajnaparamita here, extremely famous one. But I'm wondering if it's not a little much to go on. So here at this point, anybody who would like to suggest what they would think that Prajnaparamita is, what the perfection of wisdom actually is here, whether, for example, the perfection of wisdom should be understood as giving rise to let's call them religions, doctrines outside the so-called Buddhist sphere, or whether thinking in that way is not useful. It's wise just to understand it in terms of the lives of the people to whom these sorts of texts, for whom these sorts of texts were originally written. Or perhaps, if there are no questions. Sorry?
Kate, are you trying to say something? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No, I was talking to Kate. She was trying to say something, but her sound is not coming through.
Maybe unmute.
She is unmuted. You just muted yourself, Kate. Kate, you're muted. But we still can't hear you.
Yes, you're muted. There you go.
Do you want to write your question in the chat? No.
There you are. Good.
No, we can't. Kate, do you want to try logging off and signing back in and see if that fixes the sound problem? Okay. Everyone else, you feel free to unmute and ask your question or comment.
Hi, Gareth. It's Deborah. Often people, when you get kind of caught up in the Prajnaparamita being so seemingly nihilistic, people say, well, if you add non-dependent origination before, no self-existing form, no self-existing feeling, etc., then it releases that anxiety, of nothing being there, or that kind of like anger in a way, like, well, how could nothing be there, But when you put that in front of it, then that brings in the dependent arising aspect, and then you go, oh, okay, it exists, it's not the way I think it does.
That's helpful. I guess, you're probably explaining the way it should be understood. And the way I'm explaining it is unconscionable. I guess, having been in this ball game for what, I kind of go on. I'm a little shocked at how life goes by, I mean, I still feel like I'm 16, but my God, I'm not. And then I'm stuck with the same head, fundamentally, that I had back the same, all the hassles. I'm very lucky. I do feel incredibly lucky to have, been taught the things that I've been taught, but it's hardly like, cured me. I've still got I could, I'm extremely irritable. I can blabber on too much. I don't think I steal too often, certainly not as much as I used to, but what was it the other day? Yes, I was playing golf, of all things. And there, I forget which hole it was, there was somebody's sunglasses, a real beautiful pair of sunglasses. I mean, the truth was that person was never going to get them, but one really shouldn't think, oh, I'll take those. But I know, well, I'll pick them up anyway. I don't know where I put them, but, that was flirting with it, right? Taken without being given and so forth. So, Deborah, for myself, it's like, well, yeah, maybe it's got to be something which really, really does make things not worthwhile. All the things that I really, really do care about and can get upset about. It's got to totally relativize them. And so my old guru, Lobsang Gyatso, long ago said, you never need to worry about going too far. Whatever's there will be there. In other words, you could be overly nihilistic, you're affecting reality. So you can always go too far. Don't worry about it. Within remembering Nagarjuna's caution that, shunyata, emptiness, is like picking up a poisonous snake. Psychologically, if you are not careful, as I think you're saying, I loved it, Deborah, you sort of feel, you look and you say, well, if it really is that empty, well, there's nothing in this ballgame. This is really, you really go totally over into nihilism, and what's the use of that? And as you say, anger almost, certainly, well, anger is a funny way to put it, but I think it's a good way to put it. But something has to work to stop what happens in a suffering world, right? Something has to be there. And that means that all the things that people are fighting for and killing for and stealing for and doing these bad things for, it has to be as useless as a lottery ticket in a dream. It's like, when you wake up, from the dream, you don't care anymore. You really, it just ain't there. It just really never came into being. The lottery ticket in the dream, in this way of explaining, just never, ever came into being. Because if it ever came into being, you'd have won the lottery, right? And you would say, well, but it's absurd. What do you mean? I never came into being? My life never came into being? Where do you put your mind? Well, yeah, your mind never came into being, so that's not a big issue. You know what I mean? You don't need to worry about, the emptiness of emptiness, and there's 18 of them there. So it is, as Nagarjuna said, something to be extremely cautious with. It is not something one is not cautious with. But as my old guru said, but you don't need to worry about hurting anything. Apart from being careful about the capacity one personally has and the kindness one has to show towards oneself, not being driven to get one other thing, the true understanding, which now I'll be okay, because of course that's not there. So one thinks that one's searching for the true emptiness, but one's not. One is being driven by the things which the proper understanding will remove from your mind. I'm just saying that that's why I talk about nihilism. And dependent origination, absolutely crucial to it, for understanding it, oddly enough. As Tsongkhapa says, when you're meditating on the dependent origination of something, and what's coming into your mind more and more and more is the absence of it, and when you're meditating on the total absence of it, and what's coming into your mind more and more and more is the dependent origination of it, at that point, you're getting to the right view. So it is true, as you say, Deborah, that there's a balance there to it, dependent origination. But I'm always anxious, the person says, yes, 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 but conventionally. Well, heck, if there's that convention, you might as well not have the other one, because that's the world we live in, right? That's the one we kill for. It's got to get rid of the world we kill for. Just like you get rid of the fundamental Buddhist teachings as having any final value, and then give tremendous value to those teachings. It's a, this is a little, well, I'll say two things here. First is about dependent origination. And for myself, maybe I'll tell you a little story that my old guru, again, the one who said, you don't need to worry to go too far. He met the Dalai Lama properly as a school teacher. And he said that his point of view, having studied Buddhism, was definitely what we call the mind-only point of view, because without that, without something deep inside in which all of the propensities are left through the actions that we do, the good we do, something left seeds in the so-called subconscious that somehow we carry into our next totally different form of life, so that somehow there's a value in what we're doing that is not just totally useless when we try to be good, and there is a reason not to be non-virtuous. Unless there's some seeds, some propensities left somewhere in us, something down there. And I couldn't find it anywhere except in the subconscious mind, or the so-called Alaya Vijnana, the storehouse consciousness of the mind-only school. So he took that point of view. The Madhyamaka, he couldn't understand how you're going to get that, because when it's that totally not there, how are you going to, what does it matter if you kill somebody or steal or try to meditate on bodhicitta or whatever it is? It's totally empty. It's valueless. And he said that he was debating with the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama, because they were debating in front of little school kids not long after they'd come into exile, and they were trying to keep that tradition going. And so the Dalai Lama, wanting to, help his community, had gone to this school, and my old Guruji had become a teacher there because, they were trying to help their community. And just serendipity, so we go, by good luck, he was ending up there debating with the Dalai Lama, then quite a young man, right? And the Dalai Lama was debating, and he said he got the idea of why you can have dependent origination together with that level of emptiness. So that's one little anecdote, because I haven't got the slightest idea personally. But then more recently, I was doing a part of the Prajnaparamita, because I'm translating the 12-volume thing, have been for the last few years. And in this text here, let me see if I can find it again. Well, it doesn't matter. In this text that I was just presenting to you, homage to the mother of a Buddha with the Shravakas and the Bodhisattvas, in that text, it talks about this very complicated thing called, Buddha nature, right? That's a translation of the Chinese translation. Usually in Tibetan, you translate it as the lineage. And it was talking about bodhisattvas who have a direct, non-conceptual understanding of emptiness. And I'm sorry, no, it starts just before that. It starts with the bodhisattvas who are just leading up to that. And so if you think what it means to have a direct, non-conceptual understanding, which I'm sort of giving the name nihilism, so it's a direct, it's going to be totally non-dual. There is some sort of understanding, but even the mind that's understanding it is the emptiness of that itself is understood. So it's that totally. And then, so that's a mental state, right? It's a mental state in the sense that after the event, if it wasn't a mental state, it would be hard to talk about. Conventionally, you have to have some sort of understanding of it. And prior to that, you're working up to it, but you don't have it. Well, suddenly you start to see a continuum. Even though at the time of the non-conceptual understanding of that emptiness. There's absolutely nothing there, right? I mean, after the event, you're going to say there was an understanding of it, but at the time, it's a, put it here. Can you see that? I don't think we're sharing here. It doesn't matter. It struck me that there you could see dependent origination at work. The person gets to that non-conceptual understanding of emptiness, not because they're having a non-conceptual understanding of emptiness, which is something which is actually there, but because of everything they did that takes them to that non-conceptual understanding. It's a dependent origination. And you don't get it unless you've got all the things that get it to be there. And so even that is a dependent origination. Even that. And so in that sense, everything's a dependent origination. And then you have a continuum. You can even understand how you're there then. Totally not there. Why? It's a dependent origination. Each moment of you is there through whatever gives rise to that moment, just like all of those things that gave rise to that non-conceptual understanding of emptiness. And that lineage, that continuum, it doesn't have any ultimate thing that there's nothing there at all. You know, but you have all that dependent origination, and that's what you get. And it's not created. It's not produced. It doesn't come into being. It doesn't go out of being. In that sense, it is the perfection of wisdom, Prajna Paramita, right? It is that peace, you know, and it leads to all of these wonderful things. Do I, Savansh, am I the one who recognizes, or do you do it, Sneh?
Yeah, I was just going to say maybe Kate first, Savansh, since she was trying to ask a question and she's back.
Yes.
See if they sound.
If you can hear me, I'll try.
I hear you beautifully.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay.
you now.
I don't know what value this offers. It just was like a picture that came into my mind of like, you know, if somebody's like in love with you, they might overvalue your qualities and they might think you're perfect. And if you had some humility, you might say to them, oh no, I'm not perfect by any means. I do such and such to try to get better and I'm working all the time and so on and so forth. And I might in that position also say, there will be no time in which your statement that I am perfect will ever be true, because there will never be a case by which it is I arrive at something that is of such value that I didn't have to work for it to get there, right? It doesn't sound sort of what you're saying. And another image then replaced for that is, now imagine somebody doing that with a book, except the book can't tell you anything. The book can't call you back and say, no, it took me a long time to get here. And I will keep working on it, because the book itself isn't a person, so it can't do it. I don't know if that has any relevance there, but the thing that's constant in those two situations is the person perceiving the perfection. And in some respects, they'll always be wrong, no matter what they're calling perfect, because in a sense, nothing ever, it's always there in their mind, some view of it or something. I'm not proposing wisdom here. I'm just sort of saying there's something striking in my mind about what if the teachings itself could have its own humility about itself and sort of say, it took me a long time to get here, and it's probably never be true that I am perfect, because you should understand that it takes these actions and so on and so forth. It's just, I don't know what kind of offering that is. It just was kind of fun thought process that your statements and stuff were making me think about.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You the way you put it made me think that put it this way, that the unusual ending on the word nyata. So nya in Sanskrit is the same, it's J-N-Y-A. And the J is the same as the K on K-N-O-W. That's how the linguists say that word nya and our English word no, they come from the same root. So, and then it has this abstract ending. So it looks like if you put an abstract noun ending on no, you get knowledge, right? And so you're talking then, interesting about, a lady who is being seen as beautiful and is saying, yes, I have all these good qualities, intellectual, physical, so on and so forth. But you should know, I'm working towards it. And there is imperfection there. Now, interestingly, you talked about the person. Clearly, later on, you talked about knowing things, the perception of things and what's in the mind. Now, the problem is that word nyata talking about the person, the knower, or is it talking about the knowledge? And it came in my mind as you were talking that really they're interchangeable. If you're talking about a knower, you're talking about their knowledge. And if you're talking about the knowledge, you're talking about the knower. And so then the second point you make, that just came to my mind here, because, in that homage verse, it said, homage to the mother, who as the one who knows all, or who as the knowledge of all. And if you say it's the knowledge of all, it's like, wait a minute, okay, so now you're talking about the mind, the incredible, tremendous, and it's important, right? Because say in Mahamudra and in all of the teachings which we've encountered, the mind, the purification of the mind, mental states are incredibly important. And, the non-conceptual understanding, the conceptual understandings, the non-conceptual understanding united with bliss, the non-conceptual understanding united with emptiness, and so on and so on. So there's always these minds or knowledges around. And so you think, well, here the perfection of wisdom as a producer, as an origin, is knowledge. But actually, as you were speaking, Kate, it's like, it's not the human being, it's the person too. I mean, you can't have disembodied knowledge, right? It's not going to be disembodied in that sense. It might not have physical things according to the old books, but you've still got other skandhas, as they say. And so then the last point you brought up about perfection. I'm not sure that's true. The reason being, the question, I'm sure you've heard it, is, well, what do you mean by perfect generosity or the perfection of giving? Because there's still poor people around. There's still so many people who need things. So how can you have a perfection of giving? Because the perfection of giving would be, like giving everything to everybody. Da, da, da. And then it said, no, there is a perfection of giving. And it's the awakened ones have perfect giving, have perfect generosity. And it doesn't mean getting rid of all of the poverty in the universe. And so similarly with a human being, a lady, a man even, they can, according to this way of thinking, how do you say? Abhisambodhukamha. They can achieve full awakening. And that's not just their mind, right? As they say, bodhicitta doesn't care about your mind because nobody can utilize your mind apart from you. The only thing it cares about is that others can contact. Therefore, it's totally fixated on the form body in that sense, on all of the different ways of appearing, bridges to those who need to cross over, partners who need partners, money, those who need money, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So that a person in that sense can become perfect, and oddly enough, in many ways of thinking, by which I mean to say many traditions, already is perfect. The so-called Samantabhadra teachings, if you've had them, that wonderful explanations of a Vajrasattva, of a Samantabhadra, one's real nature, there from the beginning, with all of the perfections in it. It's not how Tsongkhapa won't use that exact language, but as the Dalai Lama will often say, they're talking about the same thing. Anyway, thank you.
Subhansh, please unmute.
Yeah. So, Dr. Sparham, I thought I will ask this question. You juxtaposed in your topic, right? You juxtaposed compassion and perfection of wisdom, and those two words are there, right? Or terms are there. But I thought about it a little bit, and I want to see how and this is what came up for me. You see, one doesn't need to go to the Mahāyāna. If you just stick with the Pali Canon and you look at the dependent origination, the principle of dependent origination, which is discussed in the Pali Canon, then in the Samyutta Nikaya, there's this exchange that the Buddha has with a Brahmin, and the Brahmin comes and tells him, Venerable Gautama, do all things exist? I'm just reading, I have it up on my screen over here. Do all things exist? And the Buddha replies, the view that all things exist is one extreme materialistic view. Well, then the following question is, then all things do not exist? And the Buddha answers, the view that all things do not exist is the second materialistic view. And then he goes on to the other options. I guess when I setting aside the wisdom sutras, if I just take the Pali Canon itself, then the sense when I hear this exchange, right, that the Buddha and the Brahmin have, it, the Buddha clearly is saying, right, that look, my view is neither of the two. My view is and actually the Buddha answers Brahmin. The Tathagata proclaims a teaching that is balanced, avoiding these extremes. Thus, with ignorance as condition, there are volitional impulses. With volitional impulses as condition, consciousness, etc. Right? So the Buddha's answer is simply that he just teaches dependent origination. That's his answer. He doesn't talk about. He doesn't talk about. He doesn't talk about either of the views. The Brahmin talks about either of the views. He doesn't talk about the views. The Buddha's answer is simply the principle. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so where I'm trying to take you on this is that when I read that, okay, to me, the sense that I get is this is where the Buddha is really teaching the middle way. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because it's neither of the two extremes. There's the middle way, right? Dependent origination is the middle way. It's right there in the Samyutta Nikaya.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now I turn towards the topic, the theme of our 3-day course over here, and I look at the Wisdom Sutras. And first of all, I have to tell you that I have not I've not read the 8,000, which is why I made the request first, okay, on the first day to you. But I have read the Heart Sutra. And
Oh,
when I read the Heart Sutra, right, the Buddha comes out in there. He's got Shariputra in there, and he goes and tells Shariputra or Avalokiteshvara tells Shariputra, well, no form, no form, no this, no this, no this, no suffering, no wisdom, no path.
absolutely.
He just, I mean, it's no across the board. So
Absolutely.
here's my question to you, right? Not having read the Wisdom of Perfection Sutras, is there some way in the Wisdom of Perfection that the Buddha actually talks about a middle way? Like he did in the Pali Canon, or he alluded to in the Pali Canon.
Absolutely wonderful that you brought up and actually cited these fundamental teachings. That is absolutely crucial to understanding what we're talking about here. There is no perfection of wisdom beyond those teachings. There is no other teaching. It's a critique of Buddhist teaching. In other words, the tremendous teaching that you just read for us, as Tsongkhapa says, the emptiness of a person and the emptiness of the dharmas is the same emptiness. You're not learning a new emptiness. You're not learning a new Four Noble Truths. What you are learning is, let's call it a method. I mean, that's what I say. It's balancing the nihilism because it is critiquing itself. Do those teachings work? There's nothing wrong with those teachings, but do they work? If you've got those teachings, is it all okay? No, sorry, it ain't, right? I suspect that these teachings, which we're looking at over these 3 days, were generated at a time when there was tremendous conflict between peoples who took that very teaching you so beautifully read and insisted that it means this, not that. And if you come near that book and heard it, or come near that teacher who's teaching it, or come near that temple which enshrines it, or do anything, we will have to defend it. And we'll actually begin battling each other. The teaching has nothing wrong with it. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Whether it's because of the changing times, when the Buddha taught that Brahmin, and we say when the Buddha taught that Brahmin, which is a fascinating teaching in and of itself, right? In other words, as you get to that sacred text, and there is nothing more sacred than that. If the Prajnaparamita is more sacred than that, well, tell me a Tibetan who's ever said that. Never. Now, it is also totally correct that there will be people who will accept that Buddhist teaching, just like we might accept the Mahāyāna teaching. But it's not like, oh, well, one is better than the other. One is more advanced than the other. There's nowhere you're going in that sense. There's no, as you put it so beautifully in citing that fundamental scripture, there is no existence, there is no non-existence, there's dependent origination. If you have ignorance, then you will have, how could you say, volitional factors. You will do things. Then that will cause, consciousness and so forth, all the way up to what we face now, at least I do, old age and death, and all my friends from back in those years, when we were young, 50, 60 years ago. There you are, friends. There's nothing beyond that. But just a sacred book, sacred teachings, sacred knowledge. You can have the knowledge in your head, but even emptiness, never mind the knowledge, even the ultimate is no good. You know what I mean? The non-conceptual, using Tsongkhapa's way, the way we are, the non-conceptual understanding of emptiness, that's okay. The ultimate, what the Buddha is talking about there, not there, not there, just how to say, there through dependent origination. But even that, the lovely thing about this text, the Prajnaparamita, is it's dumping on itself too. It has to, otherwise there's no value in it. We already have the teaching. There's no other teaching. As Arivamuktasena, the first of the great exegetes of this text, says, there is no other teaching. There is, however, an antidote. And that's the Mahāyāna, or the Bodhisattvas. They're doing the same teaching with an antidote. What's the antidote? Understanding of the emptiness of all things. And with that, and that's the hard thing to get, something which will generate these teachings. Because the fundamental teaching that you gave is absolutely crucial, right? Without that, there's nothing. There's just nothing. That's what the Prajnaparamita says. No form, no feeling, no perception, no. It's saying no, but actually, almost all the words are the same as the old Buddhist words. Feelings, the five skandhas, dependent origination. It's all fundamental Buddhist teachings. There is no teaching beyond them. If you say, well, what about the no? Yeah, the no. Not there, friends. Sorry. Don't go fighting over it. And so how is it balanced by compassion? I should say, I was, how could I say, at a dinner the other day here in San Francisco for a Tibetan benefactor, really. And he was like, I hate that word compassion, because it comes up so much. And all of a sudden, it's like, we're talking compassion again. Oh, God. It's like, it was a university setting. I just don't want that word. But then he did say something which was very nice. He said, the English word compassion renders the Tibetan word, not actually karuna, but it renders nyingje. And nying, sometimes it's called heart, but really it's the honorific for heart. It means the mind, and J means the Lord. So the Lord, or the foremost of all minds. That's really the literal translation of the Tibetan, which we render as compassion, the foremost of all states of mind, and it is informed by it, as was the Buddha, as he gave that teaching.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm really wonderful that you read that part of the Pali Canon, because it's so hard not to take the perfection of wisdom as somehow different. It clearly is different in one respect. I mean, historically and so on and so forth. That's a given. one has that knowledge. But in terms of why it would persist, even when you have something as profound and as wonderful as the fundamental teachings, without the quote-unquote Mahāyāna, why this so-called Mahāyāna would persist, you can explain it sociologically, and that's helpful. But it's a sacred book. And, a lot of people, you're going to hear putting down the Pali, not the Pali, notice putting down that, but putting down people who don't have the Mahāyāna or something, and even, it's terrible. Even there is nothing which cannot be an object of a negative attachment, just not there. Like, as they say, as Nagarjuna said, if you take emptiness as the flag you're going to march under, you are incorrigible. There is nothing else to teach you. At that point, the bag of tricks is finished. There's nothing else that can be done to get rid of suffering for you at this point. I mean, at some point, there's some bhakcha where you, as Lama Zopa would say, you went around a stupa or as a flea on somebody's head or something. You know what I mean? And you made that little bit of some kind of residual impression, which over time will, lead to good. Should we do the dedication prayers
Share the prayers.
again?
Yeah, Dr. Sparham, would you like to recite them, or would you like me to do
Oh,
so?
if you could put them up though for me, it's a help, because I'm not that good at finding them in there.
Oh no, I meant reciting them. Would you like
Yes.
to recite them?
Sure. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Long life prayer for the Dalai Lama. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech. May all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious one, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. Victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Munis, Tup, precious and complete teachings 10. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience, Sopa, that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request, while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge. And for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sparham.